In Lesson 5-6, we talk about an equation that has a very important impact in math. And the equation is y equals mx plus b. And I will tell you the name of that equation in just a few minutes. Right now, what I would like for you to do is complete the table, and they are color-coded. So the equation y equals 2x plus 1 is the green line that you see right here. So you are supposed to find the slope of the green line. And remember that the slope is rise over run. I'm going to write that up here. Slope is equal to rise over run. So I want to find how much the green line rises and how much it runs. So I first have to figure out 2 points. So I can see that there's 1 point right there, and a second point is right there. I would not want to choose this point because I don't know exactly where it is on the grid. But that one is a nice, easy one to find. So I'm going to put a point there and a point there. And so my slope is how much I rise, so I rise 2, and how much I run 1. So the slope of that line is 2 over 1, which is equal to 2. The y-intercept of the line, remember that's where it crosses the y-axis, or where it touches the y-axis. And so the green line touches the y-axis right there, and that has a value of 1. What I would like for you to do is pause the video now and complete the table, finding the slope and the y-intercept for each line according to its equation. Once you've done that, restart the video. These are the correct answers. Hopefully you got those answers when you did this work. Let's go ahead to the next part. Here's the part where it tells you what the equation is called. The equation of a non-vertical line can be written in the form of y equals mx plus b, and we want to highlight m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So it says right here again, y equals mx plus b, the m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. This is called the slope-intercept form, and that is an extremely important concept in math. You can use the slope-intercept form to write and graph the equation of a non-vertical line. So let's take a look at the next page. We are supposed to write an equation in slope-intercept form for each line. So I'm going to write the form y equals mx plus b. So what I need to do is I need to replace the slope, m, with a number. And I need to replace the y-intercept, b, with a number. The x and y stay in the answer, the equation. So let's take a look. In this line here, on this line, we can see that it crosses the y-axis right here. So the y-intercept is 1. So I'm going to put an arrow there, and I'm going to put y-intercept. Then I'm going to look at the points on this line. So I have the red point there. I'm going to cover it up with black. So that's a point. And I also can see that I have a point right there that's easy to figure out. So I'm going to put a point on the line there. And now I'm going to figure out my slope. And the slope is, alright, so we're looking for the slope of this line. So I do rise. So I rise 3. And then I do run. And I run 1. So I go up 3 and right 1. So that means my slope is 3 over 1. 3 over 1 is equal to 3. So my slope is 3. So now I'm going to write the equation of the line. Y equals the slope, which I just found out was 3. X stays in the equation. And my y-intercept is plus 1 because it's up 1. So that's the equation of the line. Let's try part B. So my y-intercept is easy to see. That's 4. And now I'm going to work on my slope. So I'm going to point out that I have that red dot. So I'm going to cover it with black. That's a point. And another point that's easy to see on my graph is right there. So I'm going to put a point there. And then I'm going to figure out my rise over run. So my rise, I actually go down 2. And then I go right 1. So if I go down 2, that means that the rise is negative 2. And I go right 1, that's a positive 1. So the slope is equal to negative 2. So I'm ready to write the equation. Y equals my slope, which I just said was negative 2. X stays in the problem. And my y-intercept is a positive 4, so I put plus 4. Let's take a look at part C. So on this one, my y-intercept is negative 3. I'm going to plot a couple points on this line. So there's one where the y-intercept is. I can see that there's another one right there. So I'm going to plot that point right there. And I'm going to do my rise. So I rise 1. So I go up 1. And I go to the right 2. So slope is rise over run. So my slope is 1/2. As soon as I identify my y-intercept and my slope, I'm ready to write the equation. Y equals the slope, which I just said was 1/2, times x, which always stays in the equation, plus my y-intercept, and this time my y-intercept is negative 3. So I could put plus negative 3, or I could just write minus 3. So the y-intercept is negative 3. And those are equations in slope-intercept form. Let's take a look at the next problem. We are, again, writing an equation in slope-intercept form for the line. I'm going to identify my y-intercept. That's negative 2. And then I'm going to plot a couple points on the line, so I have the red dot. And I'm going to come up with another point that's on the line. So I can't really see where that one is or where that one is, but right here, that's easy to identify. So I'm going to plot my point right there. And now I'm ready to do rise over run. So I rise, but I go down 1. And I go to the right 3. So I go down 1, which is negative 1, and I go right 3. So my slope is negative 1/3. Now I'm ready to write the equation. Y equals my slope, negative 1/3, times x, which always stays in the equation, plus my y-intercept, which is negative 2, so I can just write minus 2. Again, I could also choose to write plus negative 2. All right, let's take a look at the example about Fahrenheit versus Celsius. The line models the relationship between a temperature in degrees Celsius and degrees Fahrenheit. What is the y-intercept of the line? What is the slope of the line? So right here, if you take a look at what's given, it tells you right here that that point is the point 032. So that means my y-intercept is 32. So the y-intercept is 32. Now, to figure out my slope, I'm going to have to do a little bit of a calculation here. So it's the rise over the run, but it's not so easy on this graph. So instead, I have to use the points that are given to me. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to do that calculation for the slope. So my slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to call this point up here x1, y1, and this one x2, y2. So that means I'm going to have 32 minus 104 over 0 minus 40. That results in negative 72 over negative 40. And I can see that that can reduce. 8 goes into both the numerator and denominator. And I also can see that a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I can do that. 72 divided by 8 is 9, and 40 divided by 8 is 5. So my slope in simplest form is 9/5. So now we want to write the equation of the line. So we have y equals my slope, 9/5, x, and then plus b, which is a positive 32. All right, moving on to the next one. The slope of this line, we are going to do y2 minus y1. So that's going to be 323 minus 273 over x2 minus x1. So that's 50 minus 0. 323 minus 273 is 50. And 50 minus 0 is 50. So the slope is actually 1. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis right here, and they tell us that that point is 0, 273, so my y-intercept is 273. And now I'm ready to write the equation. Y equals 1x, so I can put the 1 there, but that's kind of silly to do. 1x. And then my y-intercept is plus, because it's positive, 273. And I'm going to go ahead and erase that 1 because we don't really need to put a 1 in front of an x. So y equals x plus 273 is the equation. All right, now what we're going to do now is switch gears a little bit, and we have to graph. And as long as you can identify the slope and the y-intercept, graphing lines is very, very easy. So the first thing I have to do is identify the slope. And the slope is the coefficient in front of the x, which in this case is 1/4. And next to 1/4, I'm going to put the words rise over run. The next thing I'm going to do is identify the y-intercept, which is the number after the x in y equals mx plus b form. Notice that the y-intercept in this problem is -5 because it was a minus sign. Hopefully you picked up on my examples above. When there's a minus sign, that means the y-intercept is negative. So the first thing I do is plot the y-intercept. That's where we start. So let's put a note here, start here. So plot -5 on your y-axis, which is right here. And then the slope tells you to go up 1 and right 4. So now I have another point on my graph. So that point there. So I started at -5 on the y-axis, and I used my slope, rise over run. And I continue that pattern, rise 1, run 4, put another point. Now if I do that again, I am out of room. So what I'm going to do instead is go to the other, in the other direction. So I can go back and down instead. Back and down instead. Now, how does that relate to rise over run? From my point here, I actually rise a negative value, and I run a negative value. So see that it ends in the same spot. That's a -1 over a -4, which we have talked about is the same slope as +1 over +4. So now I have points going all the way across my grid, and I am ready to connect the dots. So my line, you would want to use a straight edge, but I don't have one for this program that I'm using, so I'm doing my best, but you would want to use a straight edge to connect the dots. All right, we have one more example here. In this example, our slope is -2, and I'm going to make that a fraction, -2 over 1, and I'm going to put the words rise over run right next to the fraction, rise over run. Then I'm going to identify my y-intercept. It is +3. So put a note to yourself that you're going to start here. So I'm going to start with my y-intercept at +3. And then I'm going to take my slope and I'm going to rise -2. So that means I'm going to go down 2. And I'm going to run 1 to the right because it's positive. So there's where I am. So I'm going to put a point there. And I'm going to continue that pattern. Rise -2, run 1. Put a point. Rise -2, run 1, and put a point. So hopefully you see this pattern, so I'm not going to do my blue lines anymore. I have all of these points there. But if I were to, instead of putting the negative with the 2 up here, if I change that to 2 over -1, that means I rise a +2, and I go -1, which is left 1. So you can see that the pattern is still there, that still has that line up to left 1. So that line is still consistent with what we have before. And I draw my line through the points, do better than I did just there, using a straight edge, and that's the line based on the equation. So the important things for this lesson, you need to know slope-intercept form of a line is y equals mx plus b, and you need to know how to graph a line when it's given in slope-intercept form.